The hospital corridor exploded into chaos. "Clear!" a doctor shouted as a body jolted violently on the operating table. The heart monitor screamed, "Beep, beep, beep, beep." A flat line. "We're losing him. Get the crash cart now." "Scalpel. I need a scalpel." Bright surgical lights burned overhead as nurses rushed in every direction. Gloves snapped. Metal trays clattered. Sweat dripped down foreheads hidden behind masks. On the table lay Daniel Carter, a 58-year-old husband, father, and grandfather. His chest rose unevenly, like it was fighting for one last breath. His skin was pale, almost gray. At the edge of the room, his wife Linda collapsed into a chair, clutching her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Please, please don't die. Not like this." Just hours earlier, they had walked into the hospital for what they thought was a simple checkup. Now, doctors were shouting times of cardiac arrest. "Epinephrine, push it. BP is dropping fast. We need to open him up." As the lead surgeon pressed down on Daniel's chest, something caught his eye. He froze. "Wait!" The room went silent for half a second. On Daniel's back, just below his shoulder blade, were tiny holes, perfectly round, too symmetrical to be normal. "Have you seen this?" the surgeon asked quietly. Linda looked up, confused. "Holes," she whispered. "He said they were just pimples." The doctor's eyes darkened. "No," he said slowly. "Those aren't pimples." A nurse stepped back in fear. Another covered her mouth. And whatever the doctors found inside Daniel's body just moments later left the entire operating room frozen in terror. It started quietly, too quietly. 3 weeks earlier, Linda had noticed something strange while Daniel was changing his shirt. "Dan," she said casually, squinting, "did you scratch your back on something?" Daniel laughed it off. "Probably a bug bite," he shrugged. "You know how my skin is." But Linda wasn't convinced. Just below his left shoulder blade were 3 tiny holes, no bigger than the tip of a pen. Perfect circles, dark around the edges. They didn't look inflamed. They didn't bleed. They looked unnatural. "Let me clean them," she insisted. Daniel waved her away. "Linda, please. I'm fine. Don't start." Over the next few days, the holes didn't heal. They didn't scab. They didn't close. Instead, they seemed deeper. One night, as Daniel slept, Linda pressed gently around one of them. Daniel groaned in pain. "Stop. That hurts." That's when she noticed the smell. Faint, metallic, rotten. The next morning, she dragged him to urgent care. The nurse frowned as soon as she saw his back. "These are unusual," she murmured, snapping photos of file. A junior doctor came in, gloved hands trembling slightly. "Sir, have you had surgery recently?" "No." "Any injuries?" "Accidents." "No." "Any foreign travel?" Daniel shook his head, irritated. "I told you, it's nothing." The doctor pressed gently near the holes. Daniel screamed. A thin, clear fluid seeped out. Not blood, not pus. The room went silent. The doctor swallowed hard. "We're sending you to imaging," he said. "Now." An ultrasound was ordered, then a CT scan. As the images loaded, the radiologist's face drained of color. He zoomed in, then leaned back slowly. "I need a senior consult," he whispered. Linda's heart pounded. "What is it?" she asked. The radiologist hesitated. "There's movement," he said. "Movement." Before anyone could explain, Daniel suddenly clutched his chest. His eyes rolled back. The monitor screamed. And that's when everything spiraled out of control. The monitor shrieked like a warning siren. "Beep. He's crashing. No pulse. Start CPR now." Daniel's body was yanked onto a gurney as doctors sprinted down the hallway. His arms slammed against a metal rail. With every jolt, Linda ran after them, barefoot now, her shoes abandoned somewhere behind her. "Daniel," she screamed. "Please look at me." But his eyes were glassy, empty. Inside the emergency bay, chaos erupted. A nurse climbed onto the bed, pressing hard into Daniel's chest. 1, 2, 3. Charged to 200. Clear. His body arched violently as electricity tore through him. The monitor flickered. Nothing. Again. Another shock. Another violent jolt. Linda covered her mouth, sobbing. No, no. Please don't let him die like this. A doctor injected something into Daniel's 4. Epinephrine's in. BP still dropping. Oxygen saturation critical. Then suddenly, Daniel gagged. His back arched. A wet, choking sound came from his throat. The monitor blipped. Once. Twice. "We have a rhythm," someone shouted. Relief washed over the room, but it didn't last. Daniel began thrashing violently. "Restrain him. Something's wrong. This isn't neurological." Then one nurse screamed, "Doctor, look at his back." Blood was seeping through the hospital gown, but not spreading, not flowing. It was dripping slowly out of those same tiny holes. The lead physician lifted the gown. What he saw made him step back. The holes were wider now, pulsing, as if something underneath was pushing outward. The room went silent. "This isn't cardiac," the doctor whispered. "This is something else." Linda heard none of it. All she saw was her husband, alive one second, dying the next, being wheeled towards surgery. As the door slammed shut, a nurse turned to Linda and said quietly, "Ma'am, whatever is inside your husband, it's killing him." Before the hospital lights, before the alarms, before the holes, Daniel Carter was just Dad. He was the kind of man who woke up before sunrise, even after retirement. Not because he had to, but because he always had. 40 years of factory work had trained his body like a clock that never stopped ticking. Every morning, Linda would find him at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, reading the same local newspaper from front to back. He circled coupons he never used. He read obituaries out loud, shaking his head. "Too young," he'd mutter. Always too young. Daniel was 58, a husband of 36 years, a father of 2, a grandfather to a little girl who called him Pop Pop and believed he could fix anything. And for most of his life, he had, when money was tight, Daniel worked overtime. When the kids needed braces, he skipped vacations. When Linda got sick years ago, he slept in a chair beside her hospital bed for 6 nights straight. "I'm fine," he always said. "I'll handle it." That was Daniel's way. He didn't complain, didn't show pain, didn't go to doctors unless he was practically dragged. So when his back started itching months earlier, deep, burning, relentless, he told no one. When the pain began waking him up at night, he blamed the mattress. When Linda offered to take a look, he turned away. "It's nothing," he said. "Don't worry about me." But Linda did worry. She noticed how he flinched when he leaned back in his chair, how he stopped letting their granddaughter climb on him, how he showered longer and longer and longer. One night, she heard him groan in the bathroom. "Dan," she asked through the door. "I'm okay," he snapped. Too fast, too sharp. That's when Linda knew something was wrong. But she never imagined this. Back in the hospital, as Daniel lay unconscious on the operating table, Linda replayed every moment in her mind. Every time she'd asked, every time he'd said no, and the thought that haunted her most was simple and devastating. What if he'd been hiding something far worse than pain for far longer than she ever knew? The doctors worked in tense silence as Daniel lay unconscious, machines breathing for him. Outside the operating room, Linda sat alone, hands folded, eyes locked on the red surgery in progress sign. Her mind spiraled backward. Weeks, months. She remembered the excuses. "I'm just tired. It's an old injury. It'll go away." But now, every word sounded like a lie Daniel had told himself as much as her. A senior physician finally stepped out. His face was tight, guarded. "Mrs. Carter," he said softly, "we need to ask you a few questions." Linda stood so fast the chair scraped loudly across the floor. "Is he going to live?" The doctor hesitated. "We're doing everything we can, but we need to understand how long this has been going on. How long has what been going on?" Linda asked, her voice shaking. The doctor lowered his voice. The lesions on his back. The holes. Linda swallowed. A few weeks, she said. Maybe longer. He wouldn't let me look. The doctor exchanged a look with a nurse. That's what we were afraid of. Inside the operating room, imaging scans were pulled up again, enlarged, enhanced. What they showed made no sense. Whatever was inside Daniel wasn't just near the surface. It had burrowed deep, threading through muscle, wrapping around tissue. This didn't start recently, one surgeon muttered. No, another replied. This took time. Linda's chest tightened as guilt washed over her. She remembered begging him, please, Dan, just see a doctor. He'd snap back, almost angry. Do you know how much that costs? We'll deal with it later. Later never came. Now, as doctors prepared to cut deeper than they ever expected, one chilling realization settled over the room. Daniel hadn't ignored the problem because he was careless. He'd ignored it because he was afraid. Afraid of hospitals. Afraid of bills. Afraid of being weak. And afraid of what he already suspected. That something was very wrong inside his body. A nurse whispered, "What if it's already too late?" The lead surgeon tightened his gloves. We're about to find out. The operating room fell into a heavy, unnatural silence. Only the softness of machines remained. Scalpel, the lead surgeon said. Metal met skin. Slow. Precise. As the incision widened around a cluster of tiny holes, something moved beneath the surface. Not a muscle twitch. Not a nerve reaction. Movement with purpose. Did you see that? A nurse whispered. Lights, brighter, the surgeon ordered. Now. As the tissue parted, a thick, pale shape became visible. Then another. Then another. The room froze. Oh my God, someone breathed. They weren't tumors. They weren't cysts. They were worms. Long. Alive. Slowly writhing beneath Daniel's skin, like a nest disturbed too late. One nurse stumbled backward, slamming into a tray. Another covered her mouth, gagging. How is this even possible? A doctor whispered. The surgeon reached in carefully with forceps. The moment he pulled, the creature stretched. Still alive. Sweet Jesus. More emerged. Dozens. Threaded deep into muscle tissue, feeding, burrowing, surviving undetected for months. This is a parasitic infestation, the surgeon said, voice shaking. But I've never seen one this severe. The smell intensified. Earthy. Rotting. Wrong. A nurse bolted for the door. I can't. Stay with us, another snapped. As more of the parasites were removed, it became horrifyingly clear. They hadn't just entered through the holes. They had built a home inside him, wrapped around nerves, pressing against blood vessels, slowly poisoning his body from within. No wonder his heart failed, the anesthesiologist said. His system was under constant attack. Outside the operating room, Linda felt a sudden chill crawl up her spine. She didn't know why. She just knew something had gone terribly, horribly wrong. Inside, the surgeon exhaled slowly. If we hadn't opened him tonight, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to, because everyone in that room understood the truth. Daniel had been days, maybe hours, from death. The answer didn't come from the operating room. It came from a memory Daniel had buried so deeply. He convinced himself it no longer mattered. Months earlier, late summer, Daniel had taken on a small side job. A favor, really. An old friend needed help cleaning out a neglected storage shed on the edge of town. The place had been abandoned for years. Damp, dark, infested. Easy money, Daniel had said that morning, pulling on an old shirt. I'll be back by dinner. Inside the shed, the air was thick and wet. The floor was layered with rotting wood, animal droppings, and soil that hadn't seen sunlight in years. Insects scattered with every step. At one point, Daniel felt a sharp sting on his back. Damn bug, he muttered, swatting blindly. He ignored it, kept working. That night, the itching began. Deep, relentless. Over the next few days, the spot became sore, then painful, then unbearable. When Daniel finally checked the mirror, he saw a small red bump. Just one. He cleaned it, covered it, forgot about it. What he didn't know, what no one could have guessed, was that a parasitic insect had laid eggs beneath the skin. A rare occurrence. Unlikely, but not impossible in unsanitary, humid environments. The larvae hatched silently, slowly, patiently. Daniel felt the itching grow worse, the pain sharper. But every time Linda asked, he shut her down. Doctors cost money, he said. And what if it's something bad? So he endured it, every night, every itch, every stab of pain. By the time the tiny holes appeared, the infestation was already deep. By the time Linda saw them, it was already dangerous. And by the time Daniel collapsed, it was almost too late. Inside the hospital, when doctors finally pieced it together, one of them whispered, he didn't hide this out of stupidity. He hid it out of fear. Fear of bills. Fear of diagnosis. Fear of becoming a burden to the family he'd spent his life protecting. But fear had nearly cost him everything. By morning, the hospital wasn't quiet anymore. Whispers moved through the halls first. Then rumors. Then phones came out. A nurse had told her husband. A paramedic had texted a friend. By noon, someone leaked a blurred photo. Nothing graphic. Just a surgical tray covered in sealed containers. The caption read, "You won't believe what doctors removed from a man's back last night." Within hours, local news vans lined the street outside the hospital. Possible medical negligence? Rare parasitic outbreak? Public health concern? Linda watched the TV in the waiting room, horrified, as reporters speculated about her husband's condition like it was a horror movie. Inside the hospital, administrators panicked. "We need an internal review," one said. Was this missed at urgent care? Should this have been reported sooner? A public health official arrived, clipboard in hand. They questioned staff, reviewed scans, locked down records. For a terrifying moment, Linda feared they would blame Daniel, that they'd say it was his fault, that he'd ignored warnings, that he'd endangered others. But then the truth came out. Doctors confirmed it wasn't contagious. Not an outbreak. Not negligence. Just a rare, horrifying chain of events, made deadly by delay and fear. The media moved on. The cameras left. But the damage lingered. Linda sat alone that night, staring at her phone, reading cruel comments from strangers who didn't know Daniel. He should have known better. Disgusting. How does someone let that happen? She whispered through tears. You don't know him. You don't know what he carried. And behind the ICU doors, Daniel fought quietly for his life, unaware that his private suffering had become public spectacle. The doctors had warned Linda gently. The next 48 hours are critical. She barely left the ICU waiting room. She slept in a chair. She prayed in whispers. Machines kept Daniel alive. Tubes everywhere. Monitors blinking like fragile promises. Then on the third night, something changed. His vitals are stabilizing, a nurse said, surprised. Heart rate's improving. By morning, Daniel opened his eyes. Linda gasped, "Oh my God!" Dan, his lips moved. Barely, but he was alive. Tears streamed down Linda's face as she squeezed his hand. "You scared me," she sobbed. Recovery wasn't easy. Multiple procedures, weeks of antibiotics, physical therapy just to sit up again. But Daniel survived. Doctors called it medically improbable. One even said, quietly, his body fought harder than it should have been able to. When Daniel finally learned the full truth, what had been inside him, he turned away in shame. "I didn't want to worry you," he whispered. Linda shook her head, crying and smiling at the same time. "You almost left me." He squeezed her hand weakly. "I'm here." Bell, please subscribe. Because your one click is the biggest motivation for me to keep telling stories like this. Daniel came home thinner, weaker, but alive. The tiny holes on his back healed into scars. Small reminders of something that nearly took everything from him. He talks about it now. Openly, honestly, to his kids, to his friends, to anyone who will listen. "I thought being strong meant staying quiet," he says. "I was wrong. Linda still watches him carefully, still reminds him of appointments, still reaches for his hand at night, just to be sure. This wasn't just a story about parasites, or medicine, or shock. It was a story about fear, about how silence can be deadly, and how love sometimes means pushing when someone wants to pull away, because the human body whispers before it screams, and the people who love us often see the danger before we're ready to admit it. Daniel survived, but many don't. So if there's one truth to carry with you after this story, let it be this. Ignoring pain doesn't make you strong. Listening to your body, to your family, just might save your life. And sometimes the smallest signs hide the biggest dangers.